Floods are regarded to be a major problem in the Mekong Delta, and understanding the factors influencing the floods is important to develop coping strategies. Seasonal floods are happening since thousands of years in the Mekong Delta, and they are contributing to the very existence of the delta. The Mekong carries large amounts of sand from the mountains and deposits them on inundated land and into the sea. With this, the delta grew some meters every year. Recently, this process slowed down because a lot of sediments are trapped in dams or extracted from the riverbed for construction purposes. Now let's have a closer look at the causes of floods in the delta. The most prominent cause for flooding is the river. In the rainy season, it carries a lot of water and spills over the banks and inundates low-lying areas. This will be about 15% less when all planned dams are in service. The water brings sand, mud and nutrients and deposits them. This happens every wet season, and year after year thin layers are added. The old and the new layers are not very stable, and they slowly compact under the weight of the new layers on top of them. Over centuries, the compaction was compensated by new deposits. Not too long ago, humans started settling the delta. They elevated the grounds for their huts with sand, and with this, these villages were largely protected from the annual floods. As the houses were not reached by the floods, there was also no deposition of sand in the villages, but in the surrounding rice paddies, this phenomenon continued. In both, the villages and the fields, shrinking of the land continued. Sediments compensate for ground subsidence, but in the last decades the amount of sand carried by the river was drastically reduced because of upstream dams catching sand and because of sand extraction for construction. Estimations say that only 4% of previous sand loads will be carried by the Mekong once all planned dams are completed. There will be very little replenishment of sand on the sinking land. Another well-known factor has to be considered. Due to global warming, the sea level is rising by at least 5 millimeters per year. This means the high tide water is getting closer and closer to houses. Last but not least, short, heavy rains can cause flooding. In the past, the soil in villages was able to absorb some water, and excess water could easily run off in relatively small settlements. This might be different in the future. Climate change predictions say short, extreme rains will increase by approximately 50% by the middle of the 21st century. This will result in more floods. Many villages of the past developed into urbanized towns and big cities. The buildings are getting denser, roads are built, and many surfaces around houses are now covered with tiles. The water cannot penetrate the soil easily anymore, resulting in water remaining in the streets. There is another phenomenon accompanying urbanization: groundwater extraction. The demand for water grew a lot and many wells were drilled. The aquifers deep under the surface are shrinking when water is extracted. This accelerates the already existing ground compaction, and in many places 20 to 40 millimeters per year are observed. Another factor influences urban flooding. The drainage systems are often too small, clogged by waste or not existing at all. Strong rains often overwhelm the drainage network and the streets are flooded. This is increased by the mentioned density of buildings, resulting in water from the roofs flowing into the streets. The cities are big, and the water has hardly any natural way of leaving the urbanized area. It gets stuck and results in floods. In summary, this is what the future may look like. 5 factors are important to determine the height and frequency of floods. 4 of them will increase the flood hazard. Less sediments mean less compensation of ground subsidence. In urban areas, the land subsidence is dramatic. The sea level rises, and this will most likely accelerate. Short, heavy rains will be stronger in the future. The good news is that the upstream dams will reduce peak flows of the Mekong. However, this is not expected to compensate for the 4 aggravating factors, and floods will surely be more frequent and more severe in the future.